Welcome back to Curse, Code, and Crown, a live play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition podcast featuring a fully original world and campaign. I am the wizard Cronox, observer of time. Curse, Code, and Crown features our regular voiceover artists and improvisers, Laura Elizabeth as the Orc Count Eta and Princess Gwendolyn, Tyler Hewitt as Makka Deathcap, and Ryan LaPlante as Duncan Danno, alongside our dungeon master, the incredible Tom McGee. So get ready for an adventure including thrills, chills, and hope for a brighter tomorrow. It's time for Curse, Code, and Crown!
So you're venturing forth into a massive storm, different in nature from the storms you've encountered so far. Tyler, you commented off air when we were just doing a quick catch up before these that it was like that Sylvia's tent and everything else. There was a lot of wind, and that was something Makka had clocked. That was very prescient because the further you get towards the east, the harder the winds blow. And at this point, they are more a problem for you than the water. Though it does continue to rain, you can tell that these massive winds blowing in various directions, whipping around you, are complete chaos. And of course, you can see funnel clouds in the distance, touching down, becoming full twisters, kind of tearing up things here and there. You get the sense as you move further in that the terrain is starting to shift with the amount of wind blasting this area has. I think more almost sort of like desert scrub rather than sort of the richer foliage you've seen. Trees are still around, they're holding on, but a lot of them are blasted in weird directions. There's a lot of the exposed roots, that sort of thing. Because this entire climate is such a weird, like, super greenhouse, a lot of stuff continues to grow despite the adverse conditions, but it's not in great shape. More importantly, it's getting harder and harder to see and to move. You're now full on having to do the, like, comedy guy against the wind and rain bit. So I'm going to need survival checks from all three of you, please.
Ooh.
Do we have advantage for our special gear or no, Tom?
In this case, yes, I'll say you do. Technically, it's more for rainproofing than anything else, but it's the fact that you're kind of somewhat equipped against it means that you've got a bit of an advantage.
How are we traveling, Tom?
By foot.
By foot. Us and all the gnomes and goblins, did they kind of like, I just curious, did they like dress down the camp and it's all kind of being brought with them through like packs and stuff like that?
It was carrying gear but left the tent, right, Tom?
Yeah, so they're bringing part of the gear with you. You can think about it like, I've been thinking about this a bit like an Arctic expedition where it's like you set up a base camp, and then kind of the further you get from the base camp, still need to bring as many supplies as you're going to need.
Right.
But in their case,
riding a horse up the mountain, you're climbing it. Yeah. So they're dragging.
Okay.
I think it would be safe to say they have like it's mostly backpacks. There's probably a couple of sledges being dragged that have both kind of like a series of small wheels as well as sled runners. So could easily and they're not super technologically advanced, but really like a pop up, pop down kind of situation. But there's only a couple of them. They've left the majority of the heavy stuff back there. You get the sense that the stuff that has kind of created the anti-electric field has done its work and realistically would not likely be any help against the winds. So they're still bringing a lot of stuff with them just in case. But yeah, you can imagine about half of the gear that was there is pulled down under the tent that they folded down to kind of like seal it against the ground as a tarp. But
interrupt.
No, not at all. This is worth knowing. Also, like the gnomes and goblins are having a hell of a time with this. Like Sylvia is very much doing the like manic explorer thing where like, you know, the cape is flapping out behind her. Her hair is like slicked back. She's wearing the goggles. So there's a lot of like that mad grinning into the sky, but like she's having a fun time. No one else is. They're all still very workmanlike about it. There's no complaining, but they're very small people carrying very heavy stuff in massive winds. So they're not having the best of times. And neither are you, ? What were those rolls?
19 for Makka.
Great.
21 for Duncan.
Nat 20 for Ida.
Oh, amazing. So Ida, not wanting to look bad in front of your idol, you are making a good show of this. But no,
I'm like offering to carry other people's stuff. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like Duncan would be shadowing Sylvia, because if she's leading the group in that crazy adventuring way, and we know she's the technological key to getting into the observatory, she needs to be essentially bodyguarded as a bit of a crazy person. So that's where I think he'd be in this convoy.
Sure, I like that. Yeah, and she has the acro pick like clipped on a carabiner to her belt, so like you can see the case kind of bounce against her. The case is small; it's probably the size of a mic case, or like a drill. If you've got like a drill case, so like small, hardy, but bounce around. Yeah, exactly that size that Ryan is holding up, which for those of you listening is probably about a foot wide, maybe a little less.
It's like a case of poker chips.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's an object that can fit in a bread box.
Where are you guys convoy wise? Ida, were you helping people? Sorry, I'm just trying to picture this for my Duncan brain.
Yeah, I think because Ida's like weathering this like so well, I think she's probably I think she would just be helping to like these like the scientists. So it's like helping to wherever she sees that there can be help, I would imagine, like because she counts as a large basically a large creature when like dragging stuff. I think she would probably offer to drag the sledges.
Okay, I like that. That makes sense to me. Makka, would you do the same?
No, not unless kind of, I think, asked in this scenario.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think he's walking just with the group. He's probably just in the middle.
Cool.
Just managing in his own way.
Okay, cool. All right. So having passed your survival checks, you won't take any exhaustion from the storm. And Ida, you're greeted with some like very thankful looks when you take over the sledges. No one was going to ask, but they are grateful that you're pulling it. Eventually, Sylvia kind of like holds up a hand to stop because you've reached the top of a ridge. And before you kind of stretching out through the rain, you can make out certainly like twisters touching down and kind of ripping across. Seems to be a lot of sort of funnel clouds touching down and then lifting back off. There's not a lot of sustained on the ground action, which is good for all of you. It's hard to see. It's the sky has darkened the closer you've gotten to this. But you can make out blinking green lights sort of in this what seems to be almost like a small. You feel like you're kind of on a plateau and kind of moves into almost a bit of a natural canyon beneath where you can see these blinking lights. Otherwise, it's too dark to make out much. Dark both in terms of the lack of light and just the amount of storm interference of the rain whipping past your eyes. So Sylvia turns and kind of yells over the storm. Well, it looks like those are the lights for whatever the fuck our gear picked up. We have no reports of anyone operating down there, so I don't know if they're friend or foe or just indifferent, but that's where I'm going. Y'all coming with?
Ida just says, obviously, yes.
I am with you.
Duncan is standing over her shoulder, but like also facing the group, so he doesn't need to respond. He's clearly positioned for travel.
So she's like, all right, great. And basically she breaks up the Stars team into like a couple smaller groups. She's essentially creating like a pincer. Again, not really being sure whether these are friend or foe. So she sends two small groups to kind of set up an overwatch post, kind of off to your left and to your right, as far as they can on the ridge. Unfortunately, the ridge does end and kind of descends into the canyon at one point, so they can't fully, flank, but they can at least get a bit of distance. She nods to a couple who start setting up some gear here, communications equipment, that sort of thing. And then Stabbo kind of comes up and nods to you. There's a couple other gnomes. A lot of them would be the ones you'd recognize from the fence, who kind of helped in the defense of the one that went down. So clearly, like the fightier science gnomes. And Sylvia just kind of nods to the three and says, "Listen, I don't know how you guys like to do things. It was real nice when you kind of kicked in the door to my tent and helped us and all. But how do you normally approach these sorts of things? I mean, I got my way, but I don't want to screw things up for you. So what do you guys do? How do you want to approach this?"
Ida will look to Duncan as like the battle guy.
Generally speaking, we just approach, see if they look hostile or not, and then begin either conversations or combat.
And Ida just thinks to herself, like, "Oh yeah, of course, that is what we do." Like,
and she just kind of like fully throws out her arms in like a Nick Cage hanging off the jet at the beginning of Face Off, just kind of like, "Sounds great to me. Let's go kick some doors." And then she just turns and jumps, and kind of like pulling her jacket in around her, just like slides down the slope, down towards the thing. And you hear the gnomes and Stabbo just yell, "For science!" And they all go and kind of leap. A couple of them are rappelling. Stabbo is just like roll falling while kind of laughing to himself. And others are making their way down. How would you like to descend?
Makka will follow suit. He'll just retreat into his shell and then teeter off the edge.
As he retreats into his shell, I think Duncan will jump forwards and grab onto it, and he would like to ride Makka's shell down like a sled.
All right, roll me an acrobatics, please, sir.
while they're doing this, Ida's just kind of like trudging, like stomping in her feet, like down the slope.
Yeah. So I'm imagining it's a bit of that awkward, like, person who doesn't want to run down a hill.
Yeah.
So like you do the awkward like stutter step where you're kind of slide falling. Everyone else is kind of, because it's also like wet and gross.
Yeah.
And yeah.
She's gonna try to plant her feet in firmly where she can. That's, you know.
Yeah, I like it.
Acrobatics is a 12.
Okay. Great. Can you roll me a dex save, please?
Nat 20.
Okay. So he starts to slide down. You're sliding down on his back. And then at one point, Makka hits a rock, which flips him. And you literally have to just spring up in the air, just like not, hugely, but just enough to land back on him. And it looks fantastic. Like you've got like, I'm imagining the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns silhouette of Batman against a lightning sky, but it's just like you're riding a turtle shell.
So Makka, are you going like belly down or belly up?
He was belly down. Or no, you had been shell down, right? Shell down's probably the most comfortable way to slide down a hill.
Just to ensure that he fell in the right direction, though, he would have been facing the chasm, turned into his shell, and just fell forward.
Okay, so now you're shell down, tummy up, and you're.
But don't worry, don't worry, Makka, I'm steering now.
Right. You just hear Sylvia yell, "Note to self, gotta get a turtle to ride in these situations." As like you can see her like bouncing and scraping off of things. Like it's not a smooth ride down.
This is not the logical way to go down in Ida's mind.
I mean, it may not be, but they all get down there a lot earlier than you do.
There you are.
So see you in a couple rounds. Okay, so you hit the ground, you come up, and you can see, again, just like storm sort of whipping around you. Duncan, what would you be looking for, do you think? What's the first thing? Because you're probably the most vigilant person in the group.
Yeah, Duncan probably, going down when they slide to the bottom, almost rolling forwards off of Makka and to his feet, up with kind of blade in hand and Mr. Bang prepared, but not drawn yet because water exposure should be minimal. Step one would be targets or threats. That's usually like the first thing. And then is there like what structure is he dealing with? And are there any windows or anywhere else where they could be attacked from? I think he's just coming down looking for hostile intent or possibility.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, you come down. You kind of squint against it. Now that you're down, can you roll me a perception, please?
Yeah.
So it's a bit easier to see a bit closer up.
Everything's dog shit if it's not the other. That's a 5. I see wind.
Yeah. Okay. So you come down and you can see. Yeah, there's wind. You can see the blinking lights in the distance. It's still kind of hard to see. And then suddenly a massive dark shape starts like rushing towards you out of the darkness. This thing is probably about 10 feet tall, about 6 feet wide. It's got kind of a vaguely humanoid form, but is clearly kind of massive and is kind of like rapidly approaching out of the darkness. Unfortunately, you can only see kind of the dark shape. You can't really make it out. What do you do?
I think he'd yell, "Hail, friend or foe!"
You hear nothing.
That is also an answer.
Yeah. Are we surrounded by some of the tree trunks kind of thing, or are we in the open, Tom?
So you've just come down off the ledge. So you slid down the ledge. Down here, there's some debris from things that have been kind of like wind buffeted around. So think of it almost more like driftwood than trees, because you're just kind of lining the edge of a canyon now. So a lot of stuff is blown up against this, but there's not like a full tree you could like stand behind. You could get beneath a log or something though, because there's certainly enough stuff that's been knocked over.
Duncan then would break left. He's not sure because Duncan's also aware that he doesn't speak a lot of languages, and having somebody essentially yell like blah 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 from the distance doesn't mean you're a hostile or not. So he would break to the left away from Makka, because will it follow him? Will it not? It'll put him in a better position if it's bad, but he doesn't want to start a war if he doesn't need to.
Great. Makka, what are you doing?
Do I clock this as well?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Okay. I see Duncan move. I'll remain where I am, but I will cast fairy fire out in the direction of this creature to get a better sense of what it looks like, because it will be coated in glowing spores and will give off dim light.
Amazing. All right, so the spores fly out off of your body and surround the dark form. And as Duncan saw to some extent, it is humanoid in shape to a point, but from the waist down, it's actually very large and blocky. And you quickly realize that it's not a creature at all, but some kind of statue that's been mounted on something. You can make out wheels and sort of a large form. You can see kind of like two big menacing arms. And sort of an odd face wearing some kind of pointed hat. They're kind of like a hat that comes to several points. And this thing just seems to be rumbling towards you. But you can tell from here that it's not organic. Like it's not a living creature. And the arms aren't moving, I should point out.
If that's clear to everyone, then Makka, I think, he'll raise his shield. But he'll just hold there and wait for it to come closer.
Cool. Duncan, what do you do?
Duncan would look for a piece of driftwood or something that looks pretty solid that he could essentially use to jam between the spokes in the wheels. And then I think he'd move on an intercept course to try to jam up its wheels and stop this statue from either hitting Makka or smashing into the wall. He wants to know what this is.
Okay, cool. For that, I think we're probably going to go with...
I'm imagining he'd dash forwards and not throw it. He's not a spear guy, so it's going to be that pass by thing.
Yeah, I think athletics to catch up to it, and then a dex to jam it in.
Cool. Athletics. It's an 8 for the athletics. So.
8, okay. And sleight of hand to jam it in.
Sleight of hand?
Yeah.
Could I add the +3 I usually have with improvised weapons?
Yeah, totally.
If you're trying to hit it, it's glowing, so you have advantage to make an attack on it.
Oh, nice.
I'll give you advantage on this, and that makes sense.
That is a 28 to hit.
Okay. So Duncan, you take off at a sprint, grabbing like a piece of wood on an intercept course. This thing is moving quickly. The closer you get, you can see it's got the sort of the statue, and then it seems to be attached to kind of a long, probably about 4 or 5 foot tall, kind of like sort of rectangular box with like 6 wheels on it. But you've got a big enough stick that if you jam it in the spokes, it'll still fuck it up. Unfortunately, it's rolling with enough weight that as you run up and jam it in, you get pulled along with it. The force of it wrenches your shoulder in a way you weren't expecting. So you're going to take 6 points of damage from just kind of being jostled and dragged a bit.
Yep.
But as soon as you do, it's like, I think the best way to think of this is less like a bike, where if you just threw something in, the bike just fucks up. But in this case, because the stick is there, as every time this wheel turns, the stick is like fucking up its motion. It starts rumbling, and kind of like you've jammed it up enough that it starts kind of growling to a halt. Ida, you finally reached the bottom of the slope. Is there anything you would do as this thing kind of rolls slowly towards Makka? It doesn't necessarily look like a threat anymore.
Worth noting, I'm just going to use Uncanny Dodge to cut that damage in half.
Yep, that makes sense.
Because I could definitely see the glowing foe.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I feel like it's the kind of thing where, like, the minute you feel that wrench, like, Duncan treats his body in such a way that I think you would immediately realize, like, oh, yeah, no, like,
bad. Yeah.
Let go. You're not going to be like, I bet I can take it, and, like, have your shoulders ripped off.
So is this thing, like, about to hit Makka or something? Like,
I mean, it's now slowing. The problem is you've been coming down a slope, so I'm not going to give you the context for that.
Okay, that's fair. I think
you could roll if you want to roll a perception or an insight.
Yeah, I think I would like to do that.
Okay.
It's only an 11.
Yeah, I mean, I think the strangeness of it prevents you from knowing one way or the other. Makka does not seem concerned.
Yeah, okay. I think in that case, if Makka's not concerned, I'm just going to jog up beside Makka and kind of look up at it.
Cool.
And just say, like, and literally say, what is Duncan doing?
He is trying to halt this thing. It is not a creature. It is a construct. It is a vehicle, perhaps.
Acting without information. Oh my god, I can't do the voice anymore. I'm fucked.
It's never stopped me before.
It's the wind. The wind is blowing her words so they sound different.
Yeah, exactly.
Ida, I cannot guarantee that this thing will alter its course.
Then perhaps we should move out of its way.
Perhaps.
Makka, like, tenses up to, like, actually get ready to, like, take this thing on.
Sylvia appears between you, holding her electric guitar of science, very much like kind of like at waist level, like using the neck like a cannon. And she's kind of got a pick, which you can see is attached to kind of like a glowing cable that runs up her sleeve. And she just yells like, and we'll assume all of you are kind of yelling over the wind, but we don't need to do the voices the whole time. She'll just say like, hey, so we blasting this thing or what?
Let Duncan work, but keep clear. I will stay here to anchor it if I must.
And she nods and says, like your style, turtle man, and steps back. Let's see how much Duncan has slowed it. Quite effectively. So Makka, you're standing there kind of bracing, and sure enough, it's that classic like roll to a stop. I think you still actually have to like tense against it to fully stop its momentum. But it hits you like someone trying to tackle you, not like a train
hit by a truck. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it drags to a stop. There's a kind of a flash of lightning in the distance, but Otherwise, it has come to a stop. Laura, do you want to share with the class?
Sorry,
With the class.
I was just thinking about the scene in Austin Powers with like the.
I was
The
also
roller.
thinking of that when Makka was refusing to get out of the way.
Yes.
No. Yep. So good. I'm glad you shared it with the class because that's an excellent scene and always worth referencing.
Duncan would approach quickly and just check the cart to make sure it isn't, oh, look, it's a statue, but it's lined with explosives or something along that kind of booby trap scale.
Yeah. Can you give me a? I guess this would be perception
Sure.
for like a quick rundown to make sure it's not
Why do I roll anything? It's either amazing or terrible. That's a 6.
6.
It looks like a cart.
It doesn't explode and kill you, so you did gain some information, but unfortunately, I think like the way you're approaching it doesn't lend itself to looking for traps because you're approaching it like it might be a bomb. So I think it is very much like, slowly, carefully approaching it. So at a bit closer range, you can see that it's enclosed. So it's a cart with a lid at the very least. But beyond that, you got nothing.
So it's got like a vaguely humanoid torso and arms, but it has wheels underneath it. But it's a container of some kind.
So if we were to imagine, is this like a centaur of a cart, wooden
Kind
cart
of,
with
yeah.
enclosed back?
I'm just
statue front?
picturing the horse in Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah, it's in that ballpark. We can just skip rolls on this. Upon further investigation, you actually do find a hatch at the back. So think of it as like opening it. Inside is a small enclosed. There's 2 rows of benches. There's a very complex like seat with a bunch of like cranks and wheels, and like there does seem to be pedal mechanisms along all the benches. So it does seem like a transport vehicle of some sort. You have no idea why there's a statue on top of it. But yeah, it's basically like you can think of it as almost like a centaur meets like small van.
So statue is it's made of stone?
No, it's no, definitely not. You would have felt that hit quite a bit more. Laura's actually not that far off of the Monty Python piece. As you investigated, like it does seem to be kind of like a wood structure. The form itself seems to be like a canvas material that's been stretched over it to make the shape, which means it's lightweight enough that a bunch of people pedaling could actually move the fucking thing, because otherwise it just wouldn't roll. But this is definitely unfamiliar design to all of you. You can investigate it certainly, but that'll take some rolls.
Yeah.
Sylvia, could your team figure out how to pilot this and perhaps drive us closer to our target without being exposed to the elements?
She kind of like peeks in the back door and just like points at the pedals. She's like, "Oh yeah, I think if enough of us just pedal hard on those guys, and someone wants to grab that wheel, at the very least, I don't know. I think we can make that work." It's and like there's just like a bit of classic scientist smarm as she like runs her hands back through her like rain-soaked hair. She's like, it's a pretty basic piece of machinery, but yeah, I think we can figure it out. And there's some like chuckles from the other Stars team as they swarm it. Like as soon as you've given that word, like they're inside looking at things. There's just a lot of like, oh, come on. They're like clearing stuff out of the way. They're like looking at things. Can you all roll me an insight check, please?
11. He
Dirty
was not
20.
very insightful today.
That's all right.
Nat 1 for a total of 6, if it matters.
Does not. All right. Duncan, with your dirty 20, you notice that the gnomes and goblins seem to fit this. Like as they're like sitting there and trying to get sorted, like the vehicle is, again, it's got about a 5-foot clearance, but they definitely look like the right height for this vehicle.
So this is scaled for your people, which is interesting. We could probably squeeze in here. Any thoughts from the two of you?
Yeah, you guys can fit in. It'll be tight for Makka, but also it's not at full capacity. There aren't enough of you to fully fill it, so it'll just be kind of like everybody get in and then plug the back with the turtle and off you go.
It seems that perhaps this is a mode of transportation for people who live here or have lived here in the past, would be my assumption. No? Perhaps to protect them from the elements.
Then why was it empty, and how did it move without a driver?
They assume the wind was blowing it, or they sent it out after us, but we'll be heading back in that direction, so hopefully we'll find an answer to both of your mysteries. Clearly, there's no objection to taking advantage of this mode of transportation. He looks at both of them.
None.
Assuming the driver is not close by and we are abandoning them and stealing their vehicle.
Well, I think if you climb out of your vehicle and shove it towards a group of people in the distance, it sort of becomes their vehicle. This feels like a gift of the island.
Yeah, and Sylvia just kind of turns around and says, and she's examining she's clearly decided she's going to drive it, because of course she is. So from the driver's seat, she just turns back around and says, besides, if anyone's out there, like the Stars team sweeps will find them. We're very good. So don't worry. Well, if there's a driver kicking around, we'll find them, and I am gonna have some words with them about the positioning of this fucking seat. And she's like trying to adjust the seat in a way that's like comfortable for her. You can tell that it's like she has to like reach a little bit to like work the pedals, and it's not a perfect fit, though it is scaled to her size.
Well, I mean, looking on the bright side, there's enough water around we could kind of argue this is maritime law, which makes this salvage. So let's get underway. And he'll just climb in the back and take one of the seats by there. I'm imagining with his height, with only a 5-foot clearance, the pedals are not comfortable, and he is not terribly strong, Duncan. So he's not even going to try to pedal. He'll leave it to the gifted pedalers.
Yep.
So I just thought of like, I wonder if Duncan thinks like if it rains enough, he can just claim maritime law.
I think no, he's just not interested in engaging with Ida in a long-form debate with the rights of ownership. So
anytime it rains, maritime law.
Take to the sea. Yeah, I mean, admittedly, Sylvia would also just make a case for like, we collect samples. This is a sample, so this is now the property of Apex. There's lots of arguments for how to steal this vehicle, but she's happy to not have to make any of them out loud, so that's all fine. All right, so Ida, I think it's up to you to kind of wedge Makka in, or do you just hop in and let Makka
wedge himself?
Yeah, Makka's going to wait if he's got to be the last one in.
I mean, it doesn't have to be.
I'd hop in and then give him a hand.
Okay, cool. So I won't make you roll anything, because I think between your strength and his ability to just pop into his shell adorably, you'll all manage to scoot in. The peddlers get to work. Stabbo is like clearly the best of the peddlers, but there are a couple of furtive glances at Ida and Makka because like, this thing it's understaffed. There's not enough people pedaling, and you two are very heavy compared to everything else in here. But you all spend an incredibly awkward moment as everyone is like mad pedaling as fast as they can. Sylvia's got her like big, it should be noted, Sylvia wears like those big evil scientist gloves,
nice.
Because I love those gloves. And anytime I can give some of the big stupid cuffs, they've got them. She took it off to guitar, but like she put them back on. So she's got like the big like rubber glove hands wrapped around the wheel, and is clearly in like a let's fucking like burn rubber thing, but the vehicle just isn't moving. And there's just an awkward moment of, grunting and pedaling, and her just like kind of looking over her shoulder angrily, like this should be a moment for science. And eventually she starts like flicking switches and moving levers, and none of them seem to actually make the vehicle move. And she's getting increasingly frustrated doing that thing that I do when a switch doesn't work, where it's just like cranking it back and forth as if you did it slightly angrier, it would somehow make the vehicle move. And then finally, she like pulls the
e-brake.
Yeah, basically the e-brake. Yeah, she pulls like a little like triangular thing on a stick out, and suddenly it lurches forward. And she just kind of leans back over her shoulder and says, "Just terrible design. What even? You know what? Just ask them when we find them for science." And you can see there's like a little viewport with a mesh over it, so there is still rain coming in, but not so much that you couldn't drive. And collectively, you begin to move. The vehicle begins to kind of roll. I assume probably towards the lights is where I imagine you'd go, or back the way this thing rolled in. This thing rolled, if directly ahead of you is the lights. It kind of rolled in from the left.
Duncan would be steering towards the building, and I am like, they've got a target. This isn't just explore Tornado Canyon.
That's a wise decision.
So I think he'd be up towards the front if there's a place to crouch next to where Sylvia is, just watching where they're going with Mr. Bang ready in case there's some kind of hostile appearance. But he'd be suggesting they focus on target. That'd be where he'd want the group to go.
Great, absolutely. So yeah, you begin to wheel forward. The sort of massive shape cutting through the winds. You can feel the entire, particularly at the front, Duncan, you can feel the vehicle trembling as it's buffeted by winds. I think you would be able to determine that your initial assessment that this thing was likely blown forward is true. The thing's got a giant wooden canvas. It's not a sail, but like similar effect. But the rest of the vehicle is pretty solid. It's wide enough and long enough that the front gets buffered a little bit because of the thing on top, but generally speaking, you're fine. And slowly but surely, you roll towards the building. Through the darkness, you can see that it is sort of a think like one of those Arctic domes that you see set up. They're like the HAB domes,
like a biodome.
Yeah, like a biodome, but without clear, like it's not see-through. But with a sort of a massive metal superstructure around it. So it's not just like a flappy thing. It's got proper sort of girdering and everything else. And it seems to be made of a solid material. So rather than fabric or canvas, in modern terms, it'd be concrete. It's not obviously concrete because there is no fantasy concrete, but it is clearly a stone type object that has been dropped down with a steel structure around it for reinforcement. You can see towers around it with some of the lights. Also, as you move in, you can see dark shapes moving in the sky, and as the vehicle rolls forward, you recognize windmills, tall windmills, each with their own sort of blinking light atop them, spinning furiously against the night sky. And there are a fuck ton of these things. Like they are all over the place. And as you grow closer, there's a brief flash of lightning, and you can see several more large humanoid shapes looming ahead of you in the darkness. Meanwhile, back at Doc Malvern's clinic, Gwendolyn, you have you finally decided that it's time to go talk to the doctor. After talking to Bleep, you determined that you need to be a little bit more gentle with him around issues of nationhood. But nevertheless, you think that the time has come. So what is your approach? He's you know that he's working in his office, which is a little ways away, still in the tourism center, but like a little bit of a ways away from the kind of like waterproof closet that Bleep works in. What do you do?
I'm going to approach this in like a kind of like a, hey, what's going on? You're dealing with a lot, want to talk about it kind of way.
Okay.
Just to start off with.
Okay.
I think she'll just kind of like sit down on a chair, kind of like in. Sorry, what are Doc Malvern's pronouns?
He, him.
Okay, thank you. So she just kind of sits in his like peripheral vision, just kind of like not disturbing him directly, but seeing if he'll notice.
Cool. After he finishes reading a page, and then you see him reach for a feather that's sitting in a little jar. And he just takes it out and presses it between the pages, closes the book, places it down, reaches for a sort of a steaming mug that has kind of a vaguely sort of licorice smell to it, coming off it. And he sort of turns and says, yes, princess, yes. You have come to speak to this one. Is there some aid you require? Do you need assistance of any sort?
No, I mean honestly, like you've given me like a lot of assistance, and I'm very appreciative of all that. I was actually wondering if there's any assistance you could use, because I mean, after like spending a little bit of time here, I'm kind of getting the idea that like you're like wanting to like, I suppose, impart your wisdom while you and she kind of hesitates, while you still can.
Yes, dying this one is, yes, quite.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry. I didn't know how sensitive you were about it. But
And he kind of like clicks deep in his throat, in a way that you've heard him do before. That kind of seems to be his version of laughter. And he says, "A very kind approach to the subject. Yes, you have good tableside manner for a haunted suit of armor. Ha ha."
well, thank you. I was just wondering if you might want to impart some wisdom, and some of your knowledge, but beforehand, that maybe like someone in a position such as myself could do something with it.
And he'll walk over, like you'll kind of like scooch. He doesn't get fully up. He scooches over, and with his kind of like spindly hands, he kind of takes your gauntlets in his and just kind of taps them gently and kind of like almost sweetly, and says, "This one fears you do not have healer's hands. It is difficult to be precise with gloves. It is why Nev is very bad at doctoring, but the intent is appreciated. It is nice that you want to heal people." And he like tilts his head at 90 degrees.
Well, I'm quite pleased that you see it that way. I mean, really, I'm hoping to like heal a lot of people, but I mean, I don't want to make the same mistakes as were made in the past. And you seem to have some knowledge about, a type of coalition that failed before. And I was just wondering if there's any wisdom you might be able to impart on me, so that in the future people wouldn't have to suffer the same way.
And he pulls his hands away and kind of like moves his chair back a bit. Can you roll me a... This is probably persuasion.
Persuasion? Okay.
Yeah. Or investigation. I'd give you investigation if you'd prefer.
Investigation's better, but I think it is more of a persuasion. So 12.
12. Okay. He looks at you and says, clearer, that is, yes. Not medicine knowledge, but historical knowledge of the past for your coalition of the good, the willing. What is your
alliance of equals?
Yes, different names, same ideas, always. Yes.
Well, see, I'm glad you said that, because this is the problem. In that, I mean, I've started this thing, but like learning now that there have been past like alliances or coalitions that have failed. I mean, I want to make sure that the approach is even, I mean, if I'm even going about things the proper way. I'd just like to learn, because clearly you have a knowledge that I do not. And to be honest, I haven't encountered your way of thinking and your hesitancy and resistance to the idea. So I would like to get an opposing view of the situation, to perhaps get a more informed way of going about either creating this alliance or perhaps uncreating it. I don't think she's ever gonna do that, but it was more to get him to
yeah, I got that.
Talk about it.
Can you roll me a deception check, please?
Yeah. Oh, 4.
Okay. He nods, like he considers your words carefully and nods, and he says, Yes, understand your point, this one does. And then he gets up and he goes over to, he's got like almost a big, beautiful wooden cabinet that's obviously waterlogged because everything is. And he opens it with very delicate little knobs. And inside it almost looks like a very fancy fantasy spice rack. There's just all sorts of little vials and bottles of various like dried herbs and other things. And he just kind of runs one long finger along them, finds what he wants, comes over, sits down, and he just pops the stopper off and pours it into his tea. And he takes sort of a considered look at you and says, this one has imparted knowledge for some time, yes? Bleep knows all that this one has ever known and will know more than this one will ever know. My work here has been complete for some time, but stay I have because I like the company. I like to, as you have said, help people, as many people as this one can. But this one is in great pain. Always great, great pain. Agony. Mental, physical agony.
Gwendolyn's kind of like backing up just a little bit, like, oh shit, what have I done?
Yeah. And he holds up the mug and he says, in this mug is a mixture of remedies that help this one to feel okay enough to make it through the day. Yes? What I have just added also makes it very deadly, very comforting, but very deadly.
What?
And he holds up a finger and says, this one is in tremendous pain and has knowledge that would benefit you greatly. More things to share are being asked of this one. But frankly, all this one wants is the peace. And he points this skeletal finger down at the mug. Says, in this mug. Tell me, leader, what should this one do?
This episode of Curse Code and Crowd Sound was mixed and edited by Laura Hamstra, and the campaign was created by Tom McGee. Our original theme music was composed by Landon Knoblock, and Curse Code and Crown's logo was created by the brilliant Decapitated Markers. If you want to follow our players or our DM on Twitter, you can reach out to Laura at EL Hamstring, Ryan at the Ryan LaPlante, Tyler at Tyler_Hewitt, Tom McGee at McGeeTD, or you can message our whole company at DumDumDice. So please, join us again for more Curse, Code, and Crown!
Dum-Dums and Dice has to give a special thank you to the supreme beings of our Patreon at this time. Christian Menicola, the Half-Blind Prophet. Christopher Little, Sue One, George Dolby. One True Artistry, Orion Birchfield. Lorda Bradovic, Noel Lewis, Scott Garland, Anthony Griffin, Benjamin V, Gavin and Abby McDonald, Cade Peters, Richard Cranium, Anna Zed, Eric Williams, Logan, Fire Unfriendly, Acrix, Cameron Ezel, Grandma Likes D&D, Alan, Austin Nut Powers Fry, Stabby Stranger, and Jill and Noel LaPlante. If you want your name to be added to this list, you can join our Patreon too at patreon.com/dumdumdice. Thanks to them, and a little bit of thanks to you.